Dickinson Season 2, Episode 8 Recap Invisible Touch. It's the big day, Emily's poetry is finally being published. Too bad some major secrets being kept by those she loves are about to spoil the moment. Get ready for a game changer, folks. After weeks of soul-searching and agonizing over being a published writer, Emily wakes up bright and early to find her first poem on the front page of the Springfield Republican, just as Sam Bowles promised at the end of last week's episode. Emily triumphantly comes down for breakfast, enjoying the lively debate Vinny and Ship are having over its meaning. Emily holds her tongue as her mother frantically schemes how to hide the news from Mr. Dickinson, but when Edward arrives and lays eyes on his daughter's work, he admits his defeat and even gives Emily a bit of praise. But with all the talk of Emily's poem, no one is actually talking to Emily about her poem. In fact, her whole family is straight up ignoring her. Even her maid and confidant Maggie looks right through her. Enter Nobody, the mysterious apparition, to give Emily the news. In a dizzy, thought-provoking, seemingly supernatural twist of fate, Emily has become invisible. It's a wildly ironic, visual hyperbole. In the very moment Emily thought she'd become famous, no one in her life can see or hear a word she says. And no, Dickinson won't explain to you how or why, because that's not how Dickinson rolls. But nobody suggests that she use her newfound concealment to her advantage. If she's invisible, no one can see her as she listens in on how they really feel about her poetry. And that goes as well as you might have guessed. Jane and the gang are half jealous, half bored with Emily's 15 minutes of fame. Hattie and her revolutionary abolitionist writers are frustrated Emily doesn't have more of a message, and most people think she's writing about getting drunk, which invites some not too pleasant conversation around town. Emily's crushed, and feeling defeated, she follows Nobody back home, passing the cemetery where one of her first loves, Ben Newton, is buried. Here, we finally learn something about this mysterious Nobody. Emily presses him for details about his life, but he still doesn't remember his name. He does, however, remember how he died, a bullet to the chest. He remembers an overwhelming smell of metal and a horrific battle. Just as it seems like Emily will get answers, Nobody disappears. Alone, she then makes her way to Sue and Austin's house, but stops short when she hears voices coming from the barn. There's a meeting going on. The contributors of the Constellation, the abolitionist paper led by the Dickinson's handyman, Henry. He's fervently announcing that the money from their paper sales have been sent to John Brown, an abolitionist who famously led a raid on the Federal Armory at Harper's Ferry, intending to start a slave liberation movement by arming them with weapons. But Henry, Hattie, and their comrades aren't celebrating the violence to come, as these events have yet to happen, but rather the power their words have had to inspire others to rise up against injustice. As Emily listens in, still unseen, she witnesses what it's like to truly feel pride in being published and looks on at their joy with admiration. Now, we need to talk about Ao Edbury, who plays Hattie. It's almost criminal how little the scene stealer has been in the season, but I'm confident that not only will she be featured more in Season 3, but considering she helped creator Alana Smith write this episode, I'm looking forward to her having an even bigger role behind the scenes too. As the meeting of the Constellation comes to a close, Hattie pulls off her coat to reveal the extravagant gold gown Sue has been ignoring from New York, and she looks hot. What happens next can only be described as perhaps the sexiest, most soulful barn dance ever put to screen. The song is Gone Blow by Cakes Tequila. The moves are from Haley Steinfeld's tour choreographer, Nick DeMora, and it's all just pure joy. Praise be, Wiz Khalifa is back to reprise his crazy cool personification of death. But on this ride, he's not alone. As Emily stumbles into the carriage, she's introduced to the great and recently late Edgar Allan Poe, played by Nick Kroll. Now, you may have read about EAP in school, but like so many of the hilarious guest stars that have come before on Dickinson, Nick is giving the famous author a twist. This Poe is egotistical, he's drunk, and he's pretty horny for a dead guy. While Poe was a notorious womanizer and drinker, to see it come to life is pretty excellent. At first, Emily is as stunned as I'm sure every Emmy Sue fan is watching from home. She turns to leave, but as Sam starts to undress Sue, Emily resigns herself to stay, forcing herself to watch the two people she loved the most betray her. She actually pulls up a chair and defiantly sits down, a front row seat for her broken heart. Her eyes never leave Sue's face. As Sam disappears under Sue's gown, Sue looks up and it's almost as if she can sense Emily is there. But she doesn't stop, and Emily watches on, rage coming over her with every passing second. End scene, cut to black, cue enraged screams from Dickinson fans everywhere.